A skull comes out of the ground. It's been down there for 9,000 years. The jaw is still attached, and it's smiling at you. A full set of teeth, top and bottom, every one of them still sitting in its socket. No braces ever touched it. No dentist, no floss, no fluoride, no toothbrush. No idea any of those things would one day exist. And there is not a single cavity in it. Look closer though. Something's off. The teeth aren't white. They aren't sharp. They're worn down almost flat, filed to smooth stumps, like the stone steps in an old church where too many feet have passed for too many years. This person chewed their teeth halfway to nothing. And still, not one hole, not one crooked tooth. All 4 wisdom teeth sitting exactly where they're supposed to. This is the first strange thing. A mouth that would make your dentist jealous belonged to someone who never met one. We tell ourselves a story about the past, that it was dirtier, sicker, that people died young with rotten mouths and black stumps for teeth. And sometimes, sure, but go back far enough, before the farms, before the bread, and you find mouth after mouth after mouth like this one. Straight, spaced, clean. Scientists have pulled hundreds of these jaws out of the dirt, and the pattern is almost eerie in how tidy it is. Among hunter-gatherers, the crooked teeth and crowded mouths that fill every orthodontist's waiting room today were basically absent. Not rare, absent. So they had better teeth than you, with none of the tools. That's one thing, but here's the part that should bother you a little. It didn't last. About 12,000 years ago, in a warm crescent of land in the Middle East, humans did something brand new. They stopped chasing their food and started growing it. Wheat, barley, grain you could store through a winter, grind into flour, and cook into something soft. It was one of the best decisions our species ever made. Cities came out of it, writing, kings, calendars, everything you think of as history. All of it grew out of that field. And you can watch the cost of it show up in the teeth. The same dig sites, layer by patient layer, start to change. The first cavities appear, small ones, then more. The grain was feeding a particular bacteria that lives in the human mouth, one that takes sugar and starch and turns it into acid. And acid eats a tooth from the outside in. Feed it a little every day, and it simply never stops eating. Sit with that. The mouth that survived 100,000 years of ice and wilderness and everything the wild could throw at it started to quietly rot the moment we planted a seed. That's one thing, but what about your face? Because here's the part almost no one tells you. It wasn't only what farming put into the mouth, it was what farming took out of the work. A wild diet is brutal. You tear, you gnash, you grind tough roots and raw meat and gritty seeds for hours a day. And your jaw, growing all through your childhood, is a muscle being trained. The more it strains, the more it builds. Long, wide, roomy. Bone that grows to fit the job it's given. Cooked, soft, processed food asks it for almost nothing. And a jaw that is never really asked to work never quite finishes growing. This isn't a guess. It's been tested over and over. Take young animals, monkeys, pigs, it doesn't matter which, and feed one group hard food and the other group the exact same food ground soft. The soft food group grows up with smaller jaws and crooked, crowded teeth every single time. Now, here's the cruel little piece of arithmetic. Your teeth are still the old size. That's written deep in your genes, and it barely moved. But the jaw got smaller. Same teeth, less room. You already know what happens when you put the same furniture into a smaller house. Everything crowds. Everything turns and leans and overlaps. And there's a back room, the very last set of teeth to show up, that comes knocking around the age of 18 and finds there is simply nowhere left to stand. We call them wisdom teeth. And then we mostly call a surgeon. Your ancestor in the dirt had room for all four. You, more likely than not, did not. So think about what a set of braces actually is. We look at a crowded, crooked mouth and we call it a defect, a flaw, bad luck, something to be corrected with a year of metal and a retainer you will absolutely lose in a drawer. But those teeth aren't broken. They did exactly what they were built to do. They grew to their full ancient size and then met a jaw that had run out of room because of what we started eating 12,000 years ago. Braces don't fix nature. They quietly repair the damage of civilization, one teenager at a time. Something close to $40 billion a year spent undoing softness. That's one thing, but it gets worse, or rather, more recent, because the farming was only the first blow. For thousands of years after, the damage came slowly. A cavity here, a crowded tooth there. Bad, but survivable. And then, right around the year 1850, something changed again. White flour, refined sugar, food processed until it was barely food anymore, soft, sweet, cheap, and suddenly everywhere. And we can read this exact moment. Scientists can scrape the hardened plaque off an ancient tooth and pull the bacteria out of it, a tiny fossil of a single mouth, sealed for thousands of years. And what they find is quiet, steady, for age after age. And then, right around the industrial age, the cavity-making bacteria don't just increase, they take over. They become the single dominant living thing in the human mouth. That's the mouth you have right now, less varied than an ancient one, tilted permanently toward decay. The modern mouth is only a handful of generations old. It was more or less born in your great-great-grandparents' time, and then handed, unchanged, to you. And people felt it happening. That's the part that stays with me the longest. The oldest dentistry we have ever found is 14,000 years old. A single infected tooth, scraped clean with a sharpened sliver of flint by someone who had no concept of a nerve or a germ, only that it hurt, and that someone nearby was willing to try. A few thousand years later, in what is now Slovenia, another person packed a cracked, aching tooth with beeswax to dull the pain. And in what is now Pakistan, 9,000 years ago, they drilled cavities out of living teeth with a stone bit spun by a bow, the same tool used to make fire, into the mouths of people who were awake for all of it. And here's how we know it worked. Those teeth kept wearing down for years afterward. The patients lived, which means someone held still and trusted a friend with a fire drill and a prayer. The whole history of the dentist begins at the exact moment the whole history of the toothache begins. They are one story, not two. We invented the ache, and then, aching, we invented the cure. So, run your tongue across your teeth. Right now, as you're listening, feel the one that sits a little turned, the smooth patch where a filling went in, the quiet gap in the back where they took out a wisdom tooth that never had a home to begin with. None of that is a flaw in you. It is a record, written in enamel and bone, of the precise moment your species traded a hard life for a soft one, and got, in exchange, cities and books and grain in the dead of winter, and a mouth that no longer quite fits itself. The person in that skull isn't smiling because they were healthier than you, or wiser, or luckier. They are smiling because they lived on the far side of a line the rest of us crossed a very long time ago. Their teeth were worn down to almost nothing. Yours will outlast you. held together with resin and porcelain and gold. And here is the last strange thing. One day, a long way from now, someone might dig you up, brush the dirt from your jaw, hold it to the light, and without a single record of your name or your face or one word you ever said, they will know almost exactly when you lived. Not from your bones, not from your clothes, just from how little room your mouth had left.